I've done that now. Um, okay, so today is our exam week or the beginning of our exam week. And so the first thing that I want to do is just kind of bring up some kind of important things related to the exam and what you should expect on the day that you take the exam. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jot these things down on this PowerPoint file that's just going to be kind of a whiteboard effectively. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and add them to the chat, or you can unmute yourself and speak. It's your call. And I will do my best to field them as quickly as possible. Um, so so let's see. Today is okay, 10. Today is 02/17, and this is just kind of our review overview guide. Our exam will be on 02/19, 2025. So Wednesday, the exam will open at 6 p.m. When the exam opens at 6 p.m., what you can do is go ahead and log in. What I need you to do is I'm proctoring it using the two device method. So first device, I'll just call it kind of your primary device, is going to be your computer with Proctorio. If I remember correctly, I did open up the practice exam so you can test Proctorio out, just to confirm that you're in good shape, that you have a device that you'll be able to use. And so effectively what that's going to do is it's going to record your screen, and it's going to kind of have like a straight up view of you. The second thing, or the second device, is going to be, well, it's going to be a phone or a tablet or something like that. And this will be logged onto Zoom. So the second device will be on Zoom. The first device will be on Proctorio, no Zoom. And the first device will be kind of a head-on view. And the second device will be to get a profile. That's one aspect of it. But also, this second device is going to be kind of our communication mechanism, way to communicate. So if you have a question during the exam, pick up that second device, send me a message through Zoom. Um, One thing that I want to make sure that you guys are aware of is Proctorio does not assign you a grade. Proctorio will give me a score, and it will say, and that's based on like kind of a confidence reading. It will be like, oh, well, let's say that you take your exam at a coffee shop or something like that. Um, Proctorio is going to see you, and then it's going to see people in the background, and it will give me a little score, and it'll be like, oh, well, you should look at this video because there are other people on camera. And it won't say anything like minus 20 points or anything like that. It will just say, check this video out. And I will say, thank you, Proctorio. I got to be honest with you. Of all the times in the history of humankind where someone has said, check out this video, Proctorio, you have found me the most boring because that was just somebody sitting at a coffee shop taking an exam. Nothing nefarious going on, but thanks for letting me know. So that's going to be what Proctorio does. So I don't want anyone to think like, oh, well, I was taking my exam and then my roommate barged in and they talked to me and they told me that, They burnt a pizza and they're sorry about it. That will not influence your grade. Um, so that's one thing. The second device, the one that's logged into Zoom, what I would recommend doing is, and what I do in this situation, is I get my second device and I get a coffee mug or something like that, and I set it to the right of my computer and lean my, and you can't see this, but basically, here we go. Now you can. Just a second. Imagine that this is my desk. That's the setup that I've got. So this is going to have a wide angle. It's going to be able to show the profile view that you see. Now, those are the two kind of most important things that I want you to be able to do and that I want you to do. So, um, at 6 p.m., log into Proctorio and log into Zoom on that second device. Now, in the event that you have some sort of technical issue within the next like 48 hours or so, by the time before our next exam, please contact me. Or sorry, not before our next exam, before our first exam. Contact me and say, hey, you know what? My computer, I did the proctorio practice and it worked, and now I'm trying it again just to be on the safe side, and I'm having issues. Contact me now. Don't, I would recommend like test it tonight. And if it doesn't work, shoot me an email. Um, if you're if you're like, listen, my computer's it's on the fritz, it's not worth loading up Proctorio. Um, what can I do? Let me know now that, hey, I'm probably not going to be rushing out to buy a new computer, or I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z to get some other device. Um, I'm probably in the top 15 all-time procrastinators that humankind has come to know. And so I would be the sort of person that'd be like, ooh, but maybe my cousin's going to come through and I'm going to be able to borrow their computer. Don't bank on that. Just email me and say, hey, I don't think that, my computer is not really compliant with Proctorio. What can we do? And I'll get back to you and we'll have a solution so that you're not scrambling to do it like the hour leading up to the actual exam. Um, Sound good? Can I get a yes emoji, a thumbs up, and anything in the comment? Okay, cool. Um, Next up is, will we have our audio unmuted during the Zoom? Okay, thank you for asking about the Zoom. Um, I will ask you, so I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide and I can answer a question about Zoom. Zoom will be in focus mode. So that means that you can hear me and you can't hear anyone else. Everyone else will be muted. That also means that right now, if you look at the gallery view or whatever your view of Zoom is, you can see some of your classmates. You will not see any of your classmates when it's in focus mode. You will only see me. And I will see everyone who has their camera on, which everyone's going to need to have their camera on. So don't worry about other people's activity on Zoom being a distraction for you. Okay. So then focus mode's going to be engaged, so you don't have to worry about seeing anyone or anything like that. Now, in terms of prep for the exam and what you should, think about doing is everyone's going to be allowed to have a 3x5 index card. And I'm going to say index card just because that's what I always default to. Because it's kind an index card kind of has that like rigidity. It's a little bit stiffer. It's kind of like cardstock. It does not have to be an index card. I'm going to say index card, but that's just because that's kind of my default. You can use a 3x5 piece of paper. And I was having Wi-Fi issues and came to lecture late. Can you explain what you mean by profile view? So, yeah, the profile view is what your second device is going to be having. So that what I mean is it's kind of like it's going to show the workspace in front of you like what you have in front of you. So if I see a biochemistry textbook or your phone or something, I'm going to say like, "Hey, what's going on there?" Um, and it might be something where I'll say you need to put that away. Um, so I hope that it addresses that question. Both sides. Yep, 100%. So you will be able to use a 3x5 index card piece of paper, whatever, and you can use both sides. Um, and that is 3 inches by 5 inches. If you come in with a piece of paper like this that has notes on it, I'm going to send a message because I'm going to ask everyone, or everyone's going to need to, during the Zoom, I'll ask, a couple of different times, like, hey, show your index card or show your note card, and you'll hold it up. And if I see something that I'm like, it's tough to tell, approximate sizes, but that looks like a full 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. What's that? And so I'll talk to you about that directly. Um, Now, with that said, don't just go ahead and plan on doing 3x5 or 3x5 piece of paper. What I would recommend doing is I would open up a PowerPoint doc, and I'm sure that you can do this in Google Docs as well, and basically draw. That's not intended to be a flag with a flagpole. Instead, a 3 inch by 5 inch box. And then you can type, you can copy and paste whatever you want there that will help you. Um, to kind of answer this or to kind of answer questions throughout the exam. I would do that and then do the exact same thing over here. Again, 3 inches by 5 inches, and then you can print that up. You can print that up on a high quality laser printer, and have something that you can work with. I have no issue with that. I've had people do that and print stuff in size 8 font, and I don't have a problem with that. You're welcome to do that. If you can read it, go for it. Whatever you want to put on there, put on there. Um, so that's kind of what I'm getting at with respect to kind of your support notes. Um, and yeah, just go ahead and put whatever you want on there. But it's got to be a physical thing. I'm not gonna like, don't say, oh, well, I did 3x5 and I saved it as a picture on my phone. I'm gonna say, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. Um, Now, with that said, next up, calculator. Proctorio has a calculator that will be there. It will work for you. If you kind of prefer to have your own calculator, by all means, use that. But no programmable calculators. And um, whenever I say no programmable calculators, my mind immediately goes to like a TI 83, a Texas Instruments 83. And I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe someone's going to roll in with a TI 89 or something like that, or a TI 92. Oh, wow, cool, wild. And then I know what to do. And then someone rolls in with like a TI 46X, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell to do with this one. I don't know. So just if you can program anything into your calculator, do not use that. Um, and that's going to be something that I'm going to anticipate is on your workspace in front of you. Um, so think about that. Let's see, what else do we have? So these are kind of the big things in terms of like when the test rolls around. I'm going to be on Zoom and I'm going to be ready for you to join the Zoom for your exam as early as 6 p.m. If you want to wait till 6:30, that's fine. If you want to start it at 6 p.m., that's fine as well. Now, a fair question to ask, and one that I think is a reasonable question to ask is, well, what's our time constraints? I'm going to say timing. Everyone's going to be afforded 1 hour and 20 minutes, so 80 minutes. If you have accommodations for additional time, which I have a handful of folks who are, they're going to be granted whatever their accommodations afford, in which case I'm compliant with that. Now, if you start at 6 p.m., then your exam shuts down at 7:20, unless, of course, you have the accommodations or any sort of accommodations. Um, Now, the testing window basically opens at 6 and goes until when our class ends, which is 7:50. Now, any assignments or any quizzes that are on Canvas, they have a due date and an until date. And the due date is basically like you can submit something past this. So your due date for this exam is 7:50. The until date or the until time is whenever the exam shuts down. So what that means is if you are taking it and it hits 8:10 p.m., that's whenever I have the until time set to, or that's when I will have it set to. Um, that exam will completely shut off. And so what that means is if you wait until, let's say you started at 7:10 p.m., you'll get, I don't know if you get a notification, but um, yeah, I don't think that you get a notification. But at 8:10, even though you have an hour and 20 minutes to complete it, the exam will stop at 8:10. So what I mean by this and what's important what I want you to have as your important takeaway from this is you should have built into your head, like, what's a time that I should start my exam by? If you do not have any sort of accommodations, what I would recommend that you do is work backwards and say, okay, well, 8:10 minus 20 minutes. That's going to be 7:50 minus 1 hour. Okay, that's going to give you a precise time. You should not start your exam anytime after 6:50 if you want the full hour and 20 minutes. So the earliest is 6? Yes, the earliest is 6. So basically, if you start your exam between 6 and 6:50, you're going to have no issue with the entire or having the entire 1 hour and 20 minutes. Um, if you start after that, it's a little bit of a different situation. If you have additional accommodations in terms of your time, I don't want you to worry about, oh, is mine going to shut off at this time? Nope. I'm going to be completely compliant with the necessary time. And so you'll have the added time. So don't stress about that if you have accommodations. Um, the only thing that I'll ask with respect to accommodations is please account for when you start it, and try to be around the time or not much later than whenever class starts. Um, just because we have, you know, yeah. Um, if you do have accommodations and you have some circumstances where you're like, my exam, something, just contact me. Um, so just reach out to me if you have the accommodations and you have like a concern about your exam time and making sure that you get the entire time to take your exam. Um, but with that said, basically, earliest you can start is 6 p.m., join the Zoom, and then you can begin taking it. At some point during the exam, I will ask you to show me your 3x5 card, your 3x5 piece of paper. And that's kind of the important parts about this. Um, like I said, you can put whatever you want on that 3x5 piece of paper. So we get the pKa values. Are we supposed to? Thank you very much for asking that. What I will provide you with is pKa values. So you do not have to memorize those. Do not even think about memorizing those. How many? Okay, how many questions will the exam be? The exam is very similar to your practice exam. So it's 40 questions. I'm still in the process of writing the exam. I've got a handful more questions that I'm going to wrap up tonight. Um, and so I think that I'll probably have my nearly done draft tomorrow afternoon, and then I'll look at it again on Wednesday. Oh, absolutely. The practice exam, I think, is a good reflection of your actual exam. Um, we just have to show our work area slash card through the Zoom instead of Proctorio. That's absolutely right. So I'm happy that you brought that up. Proctorio, if you've ever taken an exam on Proctorio, there's this function where it asks you to like scan the room. In which case, if you've ever done that, or had the fortunate luxury of seeing the video when someone has to scan their room, um, I'm going to pick my webcam off of my monitor here, and I want to show you guys what it looks like from the instructor's perspective. That's exactly what it does because Proctorio, I guess, is not really savvy enough to realize that, you scan the room at a particular rate. And so every time I watch a playback of an exam, I'm always just like, this is kind of a silly exercise. So my point is, Proctorio will not prompt you to like scan the room. And if there's anything that I need to see, if I'm like, wait a minute, that looks exactly like Christian Anfinson, famed structural biologist, hiding in your room where you're taking your exam, then I'll talk to you. Is there a study guide or some sort of review that lists the key concepts that we need to focus on? I'm happy that you asked that question. In terms of, is there a single study guide? I do not have that. What I've got for you that I'll share is in just a second. If you go to our Canvas page, you can absolutely use scratch paper. When you go to our Canvas page, and I'll, yeah, okay, that's our Canvas page. When you go to our Canvas page, the things that I would recommend that you look at are these right here, 122 summary and study points. So I've got basically notes for every day that we've. Is this the right class? Yeah. Okay, good. Notes where covering everything that we covered for that day. So in terms of key concepts, just go through each one of those and you'll see the key concepts. And that gives some suggestions on here's what you should do. Um, I'm going to, basically compare my exam to those and make sure that I kind of am on point with those things. Um, so that's what I've got in terms of study guide. I just kind of have like a day-to-day one. Um, and if you want to shorten it, you can take that and consolidate it down, and that will give you, maybe 50 some odd points. Yes, you can use scratch paper. Okay, study guide, key concepts. There we go. Now I'm going to go back to this right here. Okay, next up is, will there only be multiple choice questions? There will not be only multiple choice questions. So of the 40 questions, you should expect about, maybe, sorry, I would say about 35 to 37 are multiple choice. And then anywhere from three to a maximum of five will be multiple answers. And any true false, I think of true false as multiple choice. So possibly. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck with my answer there, but that's what I got. So I will say possibly. Um, then yeah, those are kind of the big things. There are some thoughts and recommendations that I have as I was writing some of the exam questions today. Um, one thing that crossed my mind as a kind of recommendation is I like questions that are, I like basically two types of questions. I like questions that are super direct, where it's like, this is the structure of histidine, true or false? Or the structure of this amino acid, or the amino acid shown here is histidine, lysine, arginine, or glutamic acid, in which case it's kind of like a definitive yes or no. Then I also like questions where you have to be a little bit more thoughtful and considerate. Um, the way that I kind of write my exams is I always kind of break my exam questions down tier. Yeah. Um, and I break my questions down in difficulty tiers. I'm going to say tier one, tier two, and lo and behold, tier three. Um, if tier one, I'm going to list these as my hard questions, and then tier three as my easier. I'll say easiest. Um, I'm going to kind of break these down and, more or less, I'm going to have about 10 questions that I would classify as hard. Let me give you more of a range. 8 to 10 questions that I would classify as hard, and then about 10 to 12 that I'd classify as easy, and then whatever our difference is there, approximately 20 that are going to be this tier two. And just so you guys have an idea of what I'm thinking, an easier question would be structure. I'm just going to put a box around this. This amino acid is dot, dot, dot. So a very direct question. Um, Now I've got on the multiple answer questions, do we get partial credit if we get some answers right or no credit at all? Thank you very much for asking that question. So that is a great question because let's say if you had a multiple, the way that the multiple answer questions are graded. Let's say your question was select all true things about histidine. Yes, I did go over the side view camera, and I'll bring it back up in just a second. It's okay. Um, okay. Sorry, I'm just let me come. I've got a message. I've got a couple message. I'm going to take care of them in just a second. Select all true things about histidine. Let's say that your answer options are a positive residue. I'll say a positive amino acid. Has a ring. Then is non-polar. And then last but not least, let's say that it was can have +5 charge. Okay. So if this was a multiple answer question and somebody was answering it and they said, aha, yes, I'm going with it's a positive amino acid. Ooh, and I'm going to say that it has a +5 charge. I think everyone would agree that that is one correctly selected answer, positive amino acid, and then one incorrect answer, that it can have a +5 charge. So the way that Canvas grades that, and the way that I'm in line with this, is that's one step forward, one step back. So for that, that person who selected that combination of answers would get no credit because they selected one right answer, but they also selected one wrong answer. Now let's say that they instead did positive amino acid, has a ring, and has a +5 charge. Add to the chat, anyone, what you think the point total would be for that. You'd get half credit. You'd get zero point 0.5 points. Okay. Now, last but not least, you'd get half credit because that's two of the correct answers and one incorrect answer. So that's two steps forward, one step back. Okay. Now let's say that you did this. And I always like to think that this makes it pretty clear. Um, you selected two right answers and two wrong answers. What would be the number of points awarded for that? 0. You get no credit for that because on one hand, you're taking the approach of, aha, if I select all of the answers, then I've certainly selected all of the right answers. That's not how it works. So you get no credit for that. Okay. Now I got to go back because I got a question. Okay, I'll come back to the side view camera thing. This is a read out loud. That's fine. If you are taking the exam and you're reading the questions aloud, that's fine. Does the 3x5 card need to be handwritten? I apologize if you said this already. It does not. And one thing that I kind of recommend is go into PowerPoint, draw a 3-inch by 5-inch box, put those, type anything and everything in there, print it up, and there you go. You don't have to worry about sizing or anything like that. It's on a piece of paper, you're good to go. Then, so it does not have to be handwritten. I would kind of encourage you not to, but it's your call. Okay, next up, PK values. Oh, that's a great question. For the most part, the quizzes, those questions have been mostly tier 2. There have been a couple tier 1 and tier 3 questions in there. I need to look back at that, but I would say mostly tier 2. Um, Now, did you say Proctorio? Okay, I'm happy that you brought this up. If you are prompted by Proctorio to enter an access code, that means Proctorio is not active. That means that Proctorio is being blocked. So either, and there's a couple of different solutions for this. I would go ahead if I would try it today. I would try to resolve that. Um, Chances are it's a software update that you need to do, or there's a pop-up blocker or something that's preventing Proctorio from opening. But I will not be giving an access code because Proctorio provides the access code. So if you are prompted, hey, what's your access code? That means Proctorio didn't open to automatically input that access code. I would go through try a different web browser. Typically Chrome works. Um, I would, kind of go through the motions and try to resolve it. Just because we're going to be using Proctorio over the course of the semester. Um, but if you run into issues and that doesn't really resolve itself, then please contact me. But in the event that you contact me and say, hey, I'm trying to do the practice quiz or the Proctorio practice exam, and it's not letting me in. What should I do? What I'm going to say is try a different web browser, contact itac@txstate.edu. Can you ask questions about the material? 100%. Absolutely. You can add them to the chat or, yeah, go ahead. But this is kind of all that I had to say about the logistics of taking the actual exam. With that, I was going to go into some of the different things to consider, and give you kind of what I would consider to be like a tier 1 question. So you can kind of anticipate that. Still don't know what PK values to choose when calculating. Okay. So Um, and okay, actually two things. I need to get back to the side view camera. You're gonna log into Zoom with a second device. That would be a laptop, or sorry, a phone or an iPad or something like that, or a tablet, and you're gonna set it next to you. So that is going to get the profile view of like the space in front of your computer, so I can see basically what is in your work area. Um, then what should we focus on? I mean, I would go with what's on the practice exam. Kind of my tiers or my progression is I would first look at practice exam. Can I answer all the questions in the practice exam? Do I feel confident in the material that's on the practice exam? Next up is, well, I would go to those daily summaries and make sure that I feel good about all that content. Um, I would strongly recommend trying to kind of write my own questions as well. Take the practice exam and say, okay, well, could I rephrase this question to make it a little bit of an easier, or not easier, but to kind of come up with my own question? Okay. Um, so in terms of what should we focus on more than now, sorry, what should we focus on um, in preparation in terms of content? Um, I mean, I would, and I'm not trying to sound like a smart aleck here, but I would go back to make sure that I'm in good shape on the amino acids and their classification. That's where I would start because that your question's kind of like, I don't know where you are in terms of the content, and amino acids just kind of permeate everything. So that's where I would make sure that I'm like solid. Now, to the previous point and previous question, I still don't know what pKa values to choose when calculating the isoelectric point of a peptide that has several amino acids. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give a hypothetical peptide. Um, let's go with AFK. Um, now, when you look at your, sorry, just a second. Um, when you are taking your exam, you're going to see alanine, and I'm going to give you your chart is going to have the full names of the amino acids, and then da 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 da, phenylalanine, and da 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 da, lysine. We get feedback. What answer is correct? The questions. Um, I got a private message. We get feedback. What answer is correct after taking the practice exam? Did the questions change with each attempt? No, they do not. You're going to get the same questions over and over again. So I think that that's good practice just to kind of go through it over and over again. Can I get, take it first time? Did I get a 100? Did I get an 80? Okay, now I'm going to take it again. I got an 80 the first time. Can I get a 100? Or did I get an 80 again? Did I make the same mistakes? Did I make new mistakes? Okay, so whenever we're doing this, what you're going to see is pKa, and you might see it listed as pKa1, pKa2, and pKa3. Um, if you see that, then what you need to do is look at those numbers. And let's say that the numbers that you get are, let's say that this is 2.20, and then this is 9.81. Alanine is a diprotic amino acid. Alanine is a non-polar amino acid, so it does not have a third pKa value. Now, what I want you to be able to recognize, and this is not memorization of the pKa values, but instead what this is looking at the pKa values and kind of thinking critically about them. When we see a 2.20 and 9.81 for your diprotic amino acid, what that means is that this entire column corresponds to the C termini. All of the pKa values in this column correspond to the C terminus, the carboxyl group. This next column, this corresponds to your N terminus. And based on that alone, what do you think pKa3 corresponds to? That's right, your side chain, your R group. Great job, everyone. Okay. So these 2.2, it's going to be 2.35. I'm just throwing some numbers completely arbitrarily out there. Lysine, let's say that that's 2.19. And then phenylalanine, well, phenylalanine, hmm, let's say that that guy has a pKa value for the N termini of 9.47. Lysine, I can't remember what this one is, but I'm going to say that it's 10.46. And then let's say our R group is 12.42, just for the heck of it. Okay, so what you should take away from this is that lysine is a triprotic amino acid. Your other two amino acids in this are diprotic. Now, with that in mind, what we want to do, and what I always like to do, is take and draw a little box around my three letters that make up my tripeptide or dipeptide or whatever it is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a charge of these groups at a pH of 1. My N termini of alanine at a pH of 1, that's absolutely going to have a positive charge because, well, the N termini of this group is approximately 9.81. So when the pH is below my pKa value, it's going to be protonated. And specifically the N termini in amine, when it's protonated, it's going to be NH3 plus. So I'm going to have a plus there. Now, next up, I'm going to move to the lower portion of the box that I just drew. Does alanine have an ionizable side chain? Basically, another way of looking at that is, does it have a value under pKa3? Nope. So it does not have an ionizable side chain. So here I'm going to put a 0, and that 0 is not going to change. I'm going to put a 0 there just to be kind of a nice placeholder. Now, the next thing that I want to think about is, do I need to worry about this 2.20? Well, that 2.20 is the C termini of alanine. Where is the C terminal of alanine? It's right here. That C termini of alanine had a reaction with the N termini of phenylalanine. And what type of bond did I make between? Perfect, it's a peptide bond. So that peptide bond basically says, I don't need to worry about this. Similarly, I don't need to worry about this. Then if I continue on, F or phenylalanine does not have an ionizable side chain. And now I've got, well, 2.35 as the C terminal pKa value. Oh, don't need to worry about that. And last but not least, I don't need to worry about the N termini of lysine because I have those peptide bonds. So despite the fact that I had, let's see, that would be 7 pKa values to worry about in total, whenever I kind of map this out, I've eliminated 4 of them because I don't need them because they're mixed up into peptide bonds. Now, what that leaves behind is my R group for lysine. With a pKa of 12.42, that lysine R group is going to have a positive charge when it's ionized at a pH of 1. Then last but not least, I'm going to put a check mark here, is my C termini of lysine. The C termini of lysine with a pKa of 2.19, is that going to be protonated? Yes or no? Add it to the chat. When the pH is 1, the C termini of lysine will absolutely be protonated because remember, this is what that group looks like. Whenever that's protonated, now I hope that I didn't confuse people by this, but when it is protonated, does it have a charge? It has no charge whatsoever when it's protonated. So protonated does not always mean positive. So do I need to worry about that ionizable group? Yes, I do. When that ionizable group is protonated, what I'm going to see, so this is my molecule at a pH of 1.0. That's going to be neutral. That's going to have no charge whatsoever. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my other pKa values. This would be 12.42. This would be 2.19. Okay, for whoever asked this question, or anyone else, can I get a thumbs up, a yeah, some response that, okay, I'm good? Or if there's a place that I lost you, please, you can send me a message, either a private message or a public message. Not sure if you mentioned this, but will these pKa charts be available to us during the exam? They will absolutely. Your pKa values, I will provide you with pKa values. Oh, great question. Will we get a Chow and Fastman prediction table? If it's necessary, I will. Generally, when it comes to secondary structure prediction sorts of things, I want you to know the big ones, glycine and proline. Okay, where's the 2.19 coming from? Great question. The 2.19 is coming from the C termini of lysine. That's our carboxyl group there. Can you re-explain how the C termini is neutral and not protonated? Absolutely. So a carboxylic acid or a carboxyl functional group, that right there, that molecule or that group, I'm going to label this as an R, goes back and forth between this right here and this right here. It can be negative or have no charge. When it's protonated, that's what I'm looking at right there. When it's protonated, it has no charge. When it's deprotonated, deprot. When it's deprotonated, it has a -1 charge. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Okay, so what I'm looking at here, and whenever I say here, I'm referencing this right here. I've got my tripeptide, AFK, and I can put together what the overall charge of this molecule is. Positive, positive, nothing. So this has a +2 charge. Now, what that means is at a pH of 1, this molecule will have a +2 charge. Now, if I were to adjust the pH, so make it more basic, what would happen? These protonated groups would get deprotonated. And I'm going to go ahead and list in a different color. I'm going to go with purple. I'm going to number as environment gets more basic. Basic groups get deprotonated. Now I'm going to list them. The first group to get deprotonated is this one right here. The second group has, well, the next lowest pKa, which happens to be 9.81. That seems really high. Is that right? Yep. Because all of these other pKas I didn't care about. Oh, but what about at a pH of 7? Don't care. That, yes, it's 7 is more basic than 1. 7 is more basic than 2. Our third group to get deprotonated is that one right there. What about the fourth group to get deprotonated? Spoiler, there isn't a fourth group. There's only 3 ionizable groups, which is why we have only 1, 2, 3 pKa values. Now, what I'm going to do is come up with basically a number line. This is how I like to solve these problems. I think that it's helpful. When I deprotonate my first group, well, that means that my molecule could have a charge of +1. When I deprotonate my next group, well, that means my molecule could have a net charge of 0. Then my next group has a charge of -1. Now, I have a total of 3 pKa's And whenever I do this, I always like to draw these arrows and then write the different pKa's above those arrows. So 2.19, 9.81, and 12.42. Now, all that matters when it comes to calculating a PI from this, all of the pKa values, it's these two. So add these up, divide by 2. And when you add them up and divide by 2, you find the number that is directly between the two of those. And that would be approximately, I'm going to call it like 10.7 or something like that. Just a rough number, rough estimation there. Does that make sense? Can I get a thumbs up or a yeah if you followed that whole process? Okay. Okay, great. I think that maybe one of the things that I would make a point to kind of go back to and maybe include this um on my note card, which I'm going to go ahead and do right here, is it might seem simple and trivial, but I would say N term can be +1 or 0. C term can be 0 or -1. You might think to yourself, oh, I know that because that was organic. Yeah, be patient with yourself and say, yeah, I do know that, but that's such a simple thing. I don't want to stump myself during the exam. I want to go ahead and make sure that that little trivial thing doesn't cause me to get a question wrong. So that's what I would recommend doing that, just because it's kind of an easy thing to jot down there. Now, are you going to have, sorry, does the C term say -1? I'm not exactly sure where, I got a private message. Sorry, does the C term say -1 on the card? This means the C terminus could be either 0 or -1. Or heck, maybe it's easier to just draw this out and then write something like deprotonated or protonated. And looking at my writing there, that's one of the reasons why I would encourage to not handwrite it, because there goes half of my note card. Um, okay, so that's definitely something that I would recommend doing. Be able to calculate a PI. Are you going to have a question about calculating a PI? Absolutely. Now, where would I rank this in terms of difficulty? Or sorry, where would I rank calculating a PI? I would rank calculating the PI of an amino acid as a tier 2 question. Where would I rank calculating the PI of a peptide? 3 amino acids, 4 amino acids. I would say that's at the higher end of a tier 2 question, or maybe at the lower end of a tier 1 question. So I would put that as a more difficult question. And the reason that I say that is because, well, it's not the same to have a question of calculate PI of the dipeptide AF versus calculate the PI of the peptide RHALIQ. That's a Q. Those two questions to me aren't the same. One of them's tougher than the other because you've got to recall more information about this than you do this. Um, I mean, at their heart, they have some similarities, which is why I would put them at tier two, but I would put this right here as a tier one question. Um, Now, what I would say is absolutely a tier one question because it brings in lots of different topics would be something like, and I'm sorry, I gotta go to this so I can give myself another slide. Go. Um, you have purifying, you are purifying a protein. So when the peptide is that long, is the process the same? Yes, it is, 100%. It's the exact same process. The number of possible charges are going to vary, but you're still omitting the same pKa values and still looking at, well, do I have three pKa values? If so, then I'm always going to use the R group's pKa value. Well, what about the N termini and the C termini? That depends. It depends on if that amino acid is an N termini or a C terminal peptide, or sorry, amino acid. Okay, so let's say you're purifying a protein with a pi of 6.4. Okay, so we're trying to purify a protein with a pi of 6.4. And you extract it from leaf tissue, we'll say, with a buffer of with a buffer with a buffered solution with a pH of 4.7. Okay, before I even ask the question, let's think about this. Okay, if you have a protein with a pi of 6.4, what is the net charge of this molecule, this protein, when the pH is 6.4? Add it to the chat. You've got this protein, you put it in a buffered solution with a pH of 6.4. What's the charge of that molecule? Neutral. Overall, zero. Perfect. Okay. Now let's say that you put it in a buffered solution with a pH of 4.7. First question is 4.7 more acidic or more basic than 6.4? It's more acidic. It means we got tons and tons of protons. So now, with your knowledge that it's more acidic, what can you say or what can you predict about the charge of that protein at a pH of 4.7? And you don't have to say the magnitude necessarily, but positive. It's going to be, in this case, I would ask you to go ahead and say that, yeah, it's going to be more positive because more things are going to be protonated. And more of those things that have a negative charge are going to be neutralized, and more things that are neutral are going to become positive. So you're more than likely going to have a positively charged protein. So before I even add the question there, I'm going to add a little detail, kind of a call out bubble. Protein will be positively charged. Again, we don't think about the magnitude necessarily. We're just saying it's positively charged. Okay. And I'm not asking you to say, oh, well, it's +3 or it's +17 or anything like that. Now we're going to go on to what this question might be like. You want to use let's say, a cation exchange column. With this buffered solution, do you expect the protein to bind the beads within the column. And there's going to be a couple of different answer options, but would you expect it to? Well, let's think about this. I'm seeing some yeses, and I would agree. Yeah, you're right. A cation exchange column. What is the charge of the beads within a cation exchange column? The cation exchange column has negative beads. You're absolutely right. Since the beads are negative, well, then that's going to bind to positively charged things. So your positively charged protein will absolutely bind to those. Now, your answer options would be something like yes, then no, you would have to decrease the pH, or no, you'd have to increase the pH. And then no, because I don't know. I'd have some filler answer option in there that I can't think of right now. So I'd do something dumb like, right, answer option D is banana bread or something like that. Or add more banana bread to the extract and that will help it bind. Spoiler, it's basically never banana bread. Um, I mean, yeah, I can't think of one. It would be great to have one of those questions that somehow the answer is banana bread. Um, but this to me is like a tier one question, kind of no doubt about it. Because how do you like what do you have to know in order to answer this? Or number one, you have to know about PI. So you have to understand what PI is. Number two, you have to understand the impacts of pH on a molecule with a given PI. So that really kind of fortifies that, yes, you know what PI is. You know the impacts. Then we're bringing another topic in, and that other topic would be about cation exchange chromatography or ion exchange chromatography. And you not only have to know about what the makeup of an anion or cation exchange chromatography column is, but you have to know, okay, you have to kind of recall, okay, it's positively charged, the beads are negatively charged. Yes, they would interact. So that's why this is a tier one question, because we're bringing lots of stuff together that some of these things are inherently a little bit confusing. Um, but that to me would be like a tier one question and not really yeah. Um, I guess in terms of, yeah, so that's where that's what I wanted to share with you guys. Then, I mean, what I would do, like I said, if I'm studying for this exam, the first thing I'm going after is the practice exam. Um, and then if I'm like, okay, I've gone through the practice exam 30 times and I've aced it every single time. If you give me that practice exam right now, I'm going to ace it. Um, then what I would do is I would go to my daily summaries. After that, if you're like, I still need more, you haven't even cracked the PowerPoints. So I would go through the PowerPoints. And then if you want, you could also watch all the recordings. But again, that's a lot of material. So like I said, practice exams. Make sure that you're good on that. Is the test start of the class? The test. So for the test, you can start it as early as 6 p.m. You have 1 hour and 20 minutes to complete it. If you started at 6 p.m., you're done at 7:20. If you arrive to start it at 6:30, then and you started at 6:30, it will stop at 7:50. Everyone will get basically the exact same time unless they're afforded more based on a accommodation. Like I said, the best time to start would be between probably 6 and 6:50, no later than that. Then would we need to know Bradford assay? or UV determination, 2D focusing. Okay. So 2D focusing, yes, I would make sure to brush up on 2D focusing. 2D focusing was about separating based on isoelectric point or your PI, and then separating by SDS pages, that's second level. In terms of where I would put that, I would put that kind of lower tier of like things that I need to go through. Um, and then actually, shoot, did we? Sorry, wait, did we go through isoelectric focusing in 2D gels? Okay, then nope. Then don't worry about that because that's going to be after this exam. Sorry about that. I have this. Yeah, sorry. No. The things that, yes, no, yeah. Will our grades be available right after we submit the exam? No. Um, what you're gonna get the exam grades probably before noon the next day. Because I always like to look at the exams, and then what I'll do is I'll consolidate the bonus points that have been accumulated and your exam score in addition to and then I'll combine all that together. The exam score also will first be displayed out of 40, but I scale it all up to 100 because there's going to be 40 questions. Will there be any curves? Um, I don't do any sort of individual test curves. What I do is at the end of the semester, basically here's here's my kind of approach for grades. So semester grades, we'll say. I'm going in with the mindset that 89.5 is a good radio station, but also that is an A. Anything below 89.5 is a B. Um, Now, with that in mind, what I'm going to do is line up everyone's grades, highest to lowest. And let's say that there's one person who has an 89.6. That's not a 6. 89.6 for the semester. And then there's someone else who has an 89.5. And then there's someone else who has an 89.4. And then the next highest is an 89.3. And then the next highest after that is an 88.4. Just a second. I see a private message. What I'm going to do and what I do whenever I see this sort of thing is I look at it kind of in a unnecessarily philosophical way. And I'm like, oh, well, if you gave the person who got an 89.5, put them in a different dimension, and the person who got an 89.6, what are the chances that they would flip-flop? Ooh, possible. Same thing for the 89.4. Same thing for the 89.3. So I kind of do hey, listen, Thursday's basically Friday. Wednesday's basically Thursday. Tuesday's basically Wednesday. 7-day weekend. So what I do is I look for what I term as a natural break. So where the grades deviate from one another. And so what I do is I'd be like, okay, 89.3 and above, those are A's. Anything below that 89.3 is going to be a B. Um, I just I can't bring myself to be like, well, the person who got an 89.4 performed that much worse over and over again. And I just think back to whenever I was a kid, and one of the requests that was made by the pop culture zeitgeist was don't hurt him, Hammer, in reference to MC Hammer. And so my thought is, don't hurt him, Dr. Gray. Do the right thing. Um, Would this be before or after bonus points are added? That's after. So that's whenever I lay all the grays out. Okay. Hi, Dr. Gray. What bonus points were you referring to? Are they the participation slash poll points? Nope. Um, I think for our class, there's been 3 instances where I've said, hey, bonus points, and everyone gets a bonus point. In the grade book, you see it as, let me look for just a second. Well, I know I see it as, let's see. let's see, I'm scrolling through. There's one titled bonus point 01/22. Um, then bonus point 129 and bonus points 212. So those are things that are graded out of 0. Everyone got those points, so those are going to be added. Are we stopping after SDS page for this exam? Yeah, I believe that's where we stopped. We talked about SDS page, and that's where we called it. Um, okay. Now, with that in mind, is let's see. Okay, good. Um, does anyone have any other questions that I haven't answered? I think that I've answered everyone's questions in the chat. The quiz covers Bradford essay, but we didn't get there. Okay, well, I'll boot that for an extra week. Once we are done with the exam, we just leave. Yep, absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and stop my recording. And then